amigos from Salud Today. I'm here with Joyce Lackie, who's the author of the book I Don't Cry But I Remember, and she's gonna talk about this wonderful story that she has write about this wonderful woman. It's an immigrant woman. So hi Joyce, and thanks for being here.
Hola Carlos, gracias a usted. Hola amigos de Salud Today.
So Joyce, the first thing I want to ask you about this book is why writing about Viviana and not about other women? Because we have lots of immigrant stories. So why Viviana?
In the first place, she's the woman I knew. There are a lot of good oral histories based on interviews with many women, but this was based on a 6-year friendship. We'd already gotten to know each other, and gone to each other's birthday parties, and visited with family, and so I knew this woman, and so I had a background with her. And I think besides that, I had a colleague, a friend who was a former Spanish professor and now dean, who helped me transcribe the tapes, and her mother was an immigrant woman, and she kept finding similarities between her story and Viviana's story, and I think Viviana's story will touch many people who have an immigrant experience.
So speaking about the touching story, and like you're saying that you were her friend, but also her student, and also you're a teacher and a writer, what was the more great experience of well, it wasn't interviewing her, just sharing with her all these moments so private of her life?
I didn't relate it directly at that time in my life to my teaching, but I certainly felt that I was not only a student of Spanish, but a student of someone's life, which to me, I mean, I think that's why I taught literature all those years, is that you're studying someone else's life, you're looking at life from a little bit different perspective. I related to her also, not just as a student, but as a woman. There was a strong connection, gender connection, and just as a human being. It was very moving to be allowed to share someone else's story, and she was enjoying it too, and I think that touched me.
Okay. Now you mentioned in your introduction that it was kind of like a new discovering of something totally different because you came from a different background, and you experienced through her voice a lot of things that you would never even think about. So how was that? How you felt about listening to this woman that was totally different from you?
You know, I think that's part of what kept me coming back, is that I like difference. I like traveling to different countries. I like reading about different cultures. I like learning a language. And so just the fact that it was different is what was so intriguing. And then my background reading, too, was making a difference, because I was reading about Mexican culture, immigrant experience, and what I was reading was actually relating to her. She would tell me a story, and then I would read something similar. For example, she told me about the time that she and her husband were camping after they'd first come into this country and hiding out from the authorities. And her husband tramped around the area they were camping and found a piece of metal, old battered metal bathtub, and took some rocks and banged it in shape so that she could use it as her griddle to make her tortillas. And then I read in another book, another immigrant story of a woman whose husband had searched the area around the migrant camp and found an old rusted barrel and turned that over, and they used it to cook the tortillas. There were many instances like that.
And what was the greatest thing that writing this book left you?
Well, I'm pleased that her story will reach a wider audience. And I'm also pleased to have it finished. That was a good one. And I think it improved my Spanish, but probably the most important was a 12-year friendship with a woman who overcame a lot of obstacles and came out fighting. But she also made her peace with life. She wasn't complacent. And she had some strong words to say about civil rights and human rights and discrimination. But she took life as it was. And she also knew how to pull back and laugh once in a while.
So Joyce, how would you like the readers remember Viviana through your story?
I think as a woman of great wisdom and definitely a woman of dignity. She was firm in her decisions, whether you or I might question them. Why did she marry her husband? Why did she stay with him when her eldest son tried to get her to leave? She had strong opinions. And she also had talents that she never let on to me. I say near the end of the book that I found out only from her daughter and granddaughter that she had been in demand as a midwife, as a partera, both in Mexico and in this country. She never once said a word about that.
Oh.
She wasn't vain, and the granddaughter and I finally decided that you simply do not brag about something like that. That is a power that is given you by God, and you do not carry on and express pride in that. And she kept that to herself. She was also not consistent. She contradicted herself many times. But I just thought that made her more human,
Yeah.
you know? And then, of course, I wanted to remember her sense of humor. And I don't know, maybe that might have come with age. Looking back, maybe she thought things were funnier than she did when they happened 30 years ago. But that humor certainly balanced some of the tragedy in her life.
Yeah. So now, how would you like to remember her? Or how you remember her? What would be the best memory about her?
Just the wisdom. I asked her once what advice she would give young people today. She thought quite a while before she said it, and then she said, just to love.
Wow.
Just to love. It all came back to that.
So now, Joyce, what would you say if you had the chance, because you're the author of the book, if you had the chance of changing the ending of her story, what would you add something to it? Would you change something of her ending?
I don't know if I would change it. I think I would like to have seen her be able to stay in her own house. She told me so many times that she wanted to do that. But when she did move in with the eldest daughter, she was well cared for. She just didn't have the independence that she would like to have had. And I would like to have seen her live to see the book in print, even though she couldn't read it. I would like her to have known that it happened. But, you know, she was ready to go. In fact, before she ever moved in with the daughter, she once told me that I'm more ready to go than I am to stay.
Oh, wow.
She was very religious, and I think she felt she was going to meet her Diosito, who was her best friend. And her death was peaceful.
That's great. So, one last question, Joyce. How do you think this book can move or change other immigrant stories?
I guess I would just say that immigrant history is the history of this country. We're an arrogant nation, and sometimes we forget that. There are a lot of generous people in this country, but there's also an attitude of, I have mine, so you worry about yours. We also forget that when we need labor, we bend all the rules to get it here. And then when times go bad and we don't need labor, we'd like these people to just disappear quietly, please. So I think Viviana's story puts a face on some of those people who are struggling and makes it a lot harder to lump them into a faceless category of unwelcome people.
Well, Joyce, thanks so much for this interview and this wonderful book, and also thanks to our readers for keep in touch with eSalud today. Hasta la vista.